The 26th of June, 1941. German forces occupy the Lithuanian town of Utena, a quiet community in the country's northeast, home to a thriving Jewish population that has lived there for generations. Under Nazi rule, persecution begins immediately, and Jews are deprived of their rights, subjected to violence, forced labor, and marked for extermination. On the 31st of July, and again on the 7th of August, Jewish men, women, and children are taken to the nearby Rašė Forest. There, under the direction of Nazi forces and their local collaborators, they are stripped, forced to undress, and shot beside large pits. During these two massacres, hundreds are murdered. Weeks later, the remaining Jews are confined to the Utena ghetto, where they endure severe overcrowding, starvation, and constant abuse. Eventually, thousands of men, women, and children are taken from the ghetto to the same forest and murdered in the same brutal manner. These atrocities become known collectively as the Utena massacre, and the perpetrators will pay for their crimes with their lives. The Second World War started on the 1st of September 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. The early stages of the war saw rapid German advances in Europe, with the fall of Poland, the invasion of France, and the evacuation of British forces from Dunkirk in 1940. On Sunday, the 22nd of June 1941, under the code name Operation Barbarossa, Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union. Among the first territories to be occupied by Nazi forces was Lithuania, one of the three Baltic states that Joseph Stalin had brutally annexed in the summer of 1940. As German forces advanced deeper into Lithuania, units from the SS and the security police followed closely behind to establish control and begin the persecution of the Jewish population. Among them was SS Obersturmführer Joachim Hamann, who arrived in Lithuania as a member of the Einsatzkommando 3, a subunit of Einsatzgruppe A, which operated as part of the Nazi mobile death squads. These mobile killing squads were tasked with the systematic murder of Jews, Romani people, and other groups deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime. To enhance the efficiency of these operations, Hamann was assigned to create a mobile killing unit, which would subsequently be named after him, Rollkommando Hamann. Hamann initially recruited 8 members from his Einsatzkommando. The unit had no fixed structure, but primarily consisted of Hamann, his deputy Helmut Rauka, and an additional 50 to 58 Lithuanians from the auxiliary police forces, as well as anti-Semitic and anti-Soviet local policemen, who refer to themselves as partisans. The unit was reassembled for ad hoc operations in various rural communities, and its primary mission was the extermination of the Jewish population in Lithuania. Before the Second World War, the Jewish population in Lithuania was around 160,000, making up about 7% of the total population. Lithuania had been an independent country from the end of the First World War until 1940. In March 1939, Nazi Germany issued an ultimatum to Lithuania, demanding the cession of the Memel territory, today's Klaipėda region, an area with an ethnic German majority. On the 21st of March, the Lithuanian government agreed to the German terms, and the next day, the foreign ministers of Germany and Lithuania signed a treaty. This treaty returned Memel to Germany and included a non-aggression pact between the two countries. In June 1940, the Soviet Union occupied Lithuania, annexing the country by August 1940. By 1941, the Jewish population in Lithuania had grown to about 250,000, or about 10% of the population, due to an influx of refugees from German-occupied Poland. After the German invasion of the Soviet Union began, Nazi forces quickly occupied Lithuania. Joachim Hamann and his commando carried out mass murders of Lithuanian Jews from July to October 1941, particularly targeting Jewish communities in the Lithuanian countryside. Typically, Hamann's unit would arrive after local Nazi authorities and Lithuanian collaborators had already rounded up the Jewish population. They were often gathered in secluded areas, such as forests or remote fields, away from the public view. Sometimes, small temporary ghettos were set up for gathering the Jews from several nearby towns, and the Jews selected for executions were marched to the location, usually about 3 miles away from where they lived, and they were shot. One of the most heinous massacres Hamann and his men participated in occurred in the district of Utena, located in northeastern Lithuania. Before the war, the district had around 115,000 residents, with more than 10,000 living in the town of Utena itself, including 3,000 to 4,000 Jews. After German forces occupied Utena on the 26th of June 1941, the systematic persecution of the Jewish population began. Jews were subjected to humiliating forced labor, including dangerous tasks such as searching for mines, some of which exploded and resulted in severe injuries or fatalities. Within days, Jewish homes were marked with the label Jew, making them targets for looting and violence by local Lithuanians and Germans. Jewish men were imprisoned, women raped, and the town's synagogues and places of worship were desecrated. Rabbis who refused to burn Torahs were tortured in public, and synagogues were turned into prisons for Jews, refugees, and communists. On 2 separate occasions, on the 31st of July and the 7th of August 1941, the Jews of Utena were taken to the Rašė Forest, about 2 miles from the town. Upon arrival, they were stripped of their belongings, forced to undress, and led to large pits that had been prepared in the forest. Women, children, the elderly, and other victims were lined up at the edge of these pits and shot, their bodies tumbling into the mass graves below. The executions were carried out with brutal efficiency by Hamann's death squad, Rollkommando Hamann, along with Lithuanian collaborators. Victims were often taunted and tortured before being killed, with soldiers taking sadistic pleasure in their suffering. Those who tried to escape were hunted down like animals, and some were shot on the spot. During these 2 mass executions, 827 people were shot dead. Several weeks later, hundreds more Jews were brought to the same forest from the Utena ghetto, where for weeks they had lived in deplorable, overcrowded conditions, enduring hunger and violence. This group included 582 men, 1,731 women, and 1,469 children, all of whom were executed in the same brutal manner. Some historians estimate that Rollkommando Hamann was responsible for the deaths of up to 60,000 Jews in Lithuania alone. These atrocities were carefully documented by Hamann's superior, Karl Jager, in what is now known as the Jäger Report, which detailed the systematic execution of Jewish populations across Lithuania, Latvia, and Belarus. In his report, Jager wrote, "I can state today that the goal of solving the Jewish problem for Lithuania has been achieved by Einsatzkommando 3. There are no more Jews in Lithuania." He then added, "The goal of making Lithuania free of Jews could only be achieved through the establishment of a mobile unit with selected men under the leadership of SS Obersturmführer Hamann, who fully adopted my objectives and knew how to ensure cooperation with the Lithuanian partisans and the responsible civilian authorities." Jager's report, however, was only one part of a much larger machinery of mass murder operating across the Baltic region. Behind Hamann and Jager stood even higher-ranking figures who shaped and directed the extermination policy in Lithuania. One of them was SS Brigadeführer Franz Walter Stahlecker, who commanded Einsatzgruppe A, the most lethal of the Nazi mobile killing units that followed the German advance through the Baltic states and into Soviet territory. Under his leadership, the unit swept across Lithuania in June 1941, leaving behind a trail of devastation. Stahlecker's men, often working with local collaborators, organized systematic mass shootings in towns and villages, wiping out entire Jewish communities within weeks. In his reports to Berlin, Stahlecker described in cold bureaucratic language how Jewish men, women, and children were rounded up, forced to dig their own graves, and executed in forests and fields. By the winter of 1941, he reported to the German authorities that Einsatzgruppe A had murdered around 250,000 Jews. The command of Einsatzgruppe A later passed to Heinz Jost in March 1942, and then to SS Oberführer Humbert Achamar Piefrader in September of the same year. A long-time SS and security police officer, he continued the campaign of annihilation with the same ruthless precision. His forces hunted down surviving Jews and carried out brutal so-called anti-partisan operations, which often meant the mass killing of civilians under the pretext of security actions. Under his direction, the extermination in Lithuania continued relentlessly, enabling subordinates like Hamann and Jager to carry out massacres such as the one at Utena with complete impunity. Though many of those responsible for the atrocities in Lithuania never faced trial, in some cases justice and their past eventually caught up with the perpetrators. Joachim Hamann committed suicide in July 1945. His superior, Karl Jäger, shared a similar fate. In June 1959, while awaiting trial at the age of 70, he hanged himself in prison. Franz Walter Stahlecker, who had commanded Einsatzgruppe A during the early stages of the Holocaust in the Baltic states, was killed in action near the town of Krasnogvardeysk, today's Gatchina, near St. Petersburg in western Russia, in March 1942 at the age of 41. Humbert Achamar Piefrader, who later took over the leadership of Einsatzgruppe A, was killed in April 1945 during an Allied air raid on the Austrian city of Linz at the age of 44. During the 3 years of Nazi occupation, almost 200,000 Jews in Lithuania were murdered, and only a few thousand survived the war. Over 90% of Lithuania's Jewish population was exterminated during this period, making it one of the most complete and devastating destructions of a Jewish community in any country affected by the Holocaust. Before we end today's story, take a look at worldhistory.tv, your special destination for true history lovers. Discover exclusive documentaries and incredible stories you won't find anywhere else. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more.